The most important step to make sure your overseeding project is successful is to make sure your watering is on point. What's going on, everybody? This is Chaz with Homegrown How To. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time, thanks for stopping by. In this video, I'm going to be talking about watering your seed after you overseed. Now, this rule applies to any type of grass seed, no matter if you're doing ryegrass, bluegrass, fescues, anything like that. It doesn't matter. Now, that rule is to make sure you keep your seed moist. Now, for me to come on here and tell you how often, how much water you should put on, how long you should run your irrigation, I could potentially be doing you wrong. Now, all those things are great, but it's really dependent on a lot of different factors. It's dependent upon your temperature that you're at, your soil type that you have. Clay soils are going to hold a lot more water for longer than a sandy soil. In my instance, my soil is pretty much straight up clay. Now, it also depends on your type of irrigation. Do you hand water it? Do you use a hose end sprinkler? Do you use an in-ground irrigation system? How many sprinklers do you have? All of that plays into how much you should water your lawn. For me, my temperatures are hitting around low to mid 80s throughout the day as the high, dropping down to mid 60s at night. So what I did to start out with watering my lawn was I did 3 different cycles, also taking into account the morning dew. That water also helps keep the soil and the seed moist. So what I originally did is I did 3 cycles for 5 minutes each on all of my zones, and I just kind of monitored those to see how much water was being retained. So with the morning dew, that would keep the soil nice and wet until about 10 o'clock. I'd run a cycle for 5 minutes at 10 o'clock. And that soil would stay wet until about 2 o'clock. So I'd run one at 2 o'clock, another 5-minute session. And then I did another one at about 6:30. With the temperatures being lower, the soil would stay wet much longer and I wouldn't have to water until the next morning. And kind of a general rule of thumb to start out is to do about 3 to 5 watering sessions per day for about 3 to 5 minutes, assuming you have an in-ground irrigation system. Obviously, that's going to change if you're using one sprinkler or however you're doing that, but the key is to keep the soil moist. If you let that dry out, you have the potential of letting that seed go bad and it won't germinate in the long run. You also don't want to get the soil and the seed too wet. If there's standing water on the areas, it could potentially lead to runoff, moving the seed around. It could also potentially suffocate that seed, drown it out, and it's not going to germinate. So you'll want to keep that seed moist. Even as it starts germinating, you're going to want to keep that seed moist for about 2 to 4 weeks, depending upon your grass type. I'm going on to week 4. Tomorrow will be week 3. I'll do 1 more week of this. Temperatures have started lower a little bit more, so I'm actually dropped that down to 2 watering sessions. As I would walk on the lawn about a week ago, I'd noticed things would get kind of mushy. It's not ideal for the seed and the new seedlings as well. So currently I'm down to 2 watering sessions at the end of week 3 going into week 4, and I'm going to keep that cycle. It's pretty fine-tuned. I'm going to keep that going until the end of this week, and then I will start watering a little bit longer and deeper for 1 session per day. Probably keep that going for about a week or 2. Kind of keep that going into an every other day cycle for a couple weeks as well, and then eventually work that into 2 to 3 waterings per week. So basically what you want to do is keep the seed and soil moist. You don't want it to be too wet, you don't want it to be dry. Those are both areas of failure. You don't want that. And obviously you'll want to take into account any sort of rain that you get. I have a smart sprinkler timer from Imolaza that basically tracks the weather, tracks the rain. Will basically not water if I get any rain that day. And with that, I also have to make sure if I get a little bit of rain, which is usually what we get here in Utah, there's just small bursts of rain. If that happens, I'll still have to water it. So far, I've got some pretty good germination going. Seedlings are starting to get they're about an inch and a half tall right now, and things are looking pretty good. Now, I did do a pre-germination on my seed, so my Kentucky bluegrass was able to get germination in 6 days after I overseeded, which is insane. I highly recommend looking into pre-germinating your seed, especially if you're getting towards the end of your season and you kind of missed your great window of overseeding. Doing the pre-germination might be a great idea for that. I'll link that video down in the description below, so check that out as well. If you guys have done anything differently, please let me know in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe if you found this video helpful. Thank you guys for watching. Y'all have a great day.